Hey everyone, Pastor George here with our Wednesday Bible study recap. And today we are starting our new book of the Bible in the Old Testament, the book of Job. And I'm really excited to get into it. And I just wanted to use this time to talk a little bit about what we talked about this morning as we set up this story and go into it. And so this morning we read the first chapter of the book of Job. And uh, Job is an interesting book because you have to read it in the context of the time that it was written. But even when you do that, you see how impactful it is for us today, because at the core of the question of the book of Job is the question of evil, right? And really the question, why do bad things happen to good people, or at least that's how it's usually been phrased. But I guess I would use the term a righteous person probably in this case, because that's more of what the Bible is concerned about. And when it comes to these types of things, good equals righteousness, not just like someone who's kind-hearted or something like that. Although these two things can be certainly related and probably usually are. But regardless, that's it. So just a little bit of a background. We don't know who wrote the book of Job. It has an anonymous author. And there's a lot of debate. Well, not a lot of debate. It's really up to the reader's intention about how you want to understand it. Is it a literal story that happened? Is it a poem? Is it like a myth, but a myth in like the sense of like a story to communicate some sort of truth, right? And so there's all these different debates about what it could mean, and so I think that it's or what it actually is, and I don't really wade into that. I go along the route that it's like a story or a poem that is designed to get us to think more deeply about suffering and the answer to that, which is very prescient for us now, because of course we still see tragic things and evil things happen all the time, and so Job kind of helps us to work through those questions as well. And it was probably written during the exilic or post-exilic period. So the Jews have left Israel and been taken to Babylon, and this could have been written while they were in Babylon or after, but it clearly has that memory of them losing their homeland and seeing the suffering that happened out of that and trying to figure out kind of why. Some of it is understandable. They can understand why some of those things happened, but still they kind of struggle with what about any righteous people? Why do they have to suffer as well, right? And this is within a context because Job is considered one of the three wisdom books of the Bible, the other two being Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. And actually, all of these books have something to say about the problem of evil, and they interestingly kind of give different understandings of it. And you can actually see kind of Job being a commentary on the other two. So Proverbs is, I guess, what you would consider a more typical way that we teach righteousness to people, right? You do good things and you will receive blessing for them, right? And a lot of the times in our life, like Proverbs isn't wrong. A lot of the times when you do good things do happen, right? When you treat people the way that you want to be treated, surprise, you're treated much nicer, right? This is why Jesus teaches that. But then, Ecclesiastes kind of looks at that and says, well, that's not really the case. The race does not always go to the swiftest, right? Or the bread to the strongest. Sometimes life seems unfair, and kind of the takeaway of the thinker in Ecclesiastes is that everything is kind of chance, and you kind of just need to deal with the fact that life is formless and hevel, and which is a Hebrew word for like smoke or vapor, something you can't really grasp and is amorphous, right? So you can see that takes a more cynical approach. And then Job is in the middle, because the book of Job recognizes that righteousness is important and that righteousness is rewarded. But at the same time, that if you are a righteous person, it doesn't mean that you're going to be free from suffering. In fact, terrible suffering can still happen to you. So that's kind of the setup. And as we go through it, you'll see that they have a lot of these types of conversations between Job and his friends, who we're going to meet in a little bit. But this week, we kind of have the setup. We have the setup of the heavenly court, where Satan basically says that, I can get Job to rebuke you, and God says, no, you can't. And God gives him the power to do it. I think, again, this is to realize that the God and Satan aren't two equal opposing forces. God is always the one in control. And if Satan is allowed to do anything, it's within God's sovereign will. And so he allows Satan to go and basically start to ruin Job's life. And we're going to get there. I mean, he kills all of all of the livestock, all of the wonderful things that Job has. He kills his servants, and then he kills his children, right? And then next week we're going to see Job himself be affected by that. And all of this is to tempt Job away and go into despair, right? And to say, God has forsaken me, and then Satan will be declared the victor in this contest over God, right? Because he was able to get Job to forsake the Lord, and God knows that that isn't going to happen, and we're going to see how people talk about these things going forward. But it's an interesting thing about the concept of evil, that even in the book of Job, right, there's this strong belief right from the beginning that evil happens within God's control and within His will, right? That He is able to allow these things to happen, and there's going to be more conversation about kind of why that is, or what effect that should have, or how we respond to these things. And I think it's really important to think about these things, because when we run into tragic events in our own lives or in the world, we actually can have an answer for these things, or be at least think a little about these things a little bit more deeply than just surface level thoughts. And so I'm excited to go into the book of Job. It can be a bit of a downer sometimes, but I think its upshot is ultimately a wonderful thing. And it's 42 chapters, so it's going to take us 42 weeks, but I'm still excited to go through it. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow for my mailbag, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday as we continue to go through the book of Job. Peace out.